Hi, it's Kevin here from the Cloud Over Africa podcast, and today we're speaking to Carl Wallace, the Group CEO for Digital HQ and the lead innovator in the Ydox product. Carl, why don't we start with you telling the listeners a bit about yourself, about what you've done?
As you know, Carl Wallace, I'm the CEO of the Digital HQ Group, and we're very passionate about technology. We mainly focus on technology that business-to-business technology that solves real problems for businesses, and mainly that automates processes and enables businesses to operate better.
Right. Carl, so Ydox, you've described it as a work tool. Can you go a bit more into that? Because that defines so many things. It's extremely broad. So what elements does it bring together?
Cool. So obviously most companies make use of quite a variety of tools in order to serve certain purposes in their working environment. And it's number one, it's expensive to use all of these tools, and number two, a lot of them are not that secure. So with cyber threats becoming such a huge problem, so a tool like email, for example, is extremely risky, and it's difficult for big organizations to keep on training their people on cyber security and protecting them in this and that. So we've tried to develop a tool that combines a lot of those working elements into one tool and removing some of the communication from email into a safer environment.
Right.
So the idea with Ydox is to combine all your work functions into one platform and try and minimize the use of email and even paper. You can use Ydox to go paperless.
So combining the document management components with the collaboration elements as well.
So everything from your document management, the creating of documents, co-authoring of documents between team members and clients, all of that happens inside of Ydox. And then also on the communication side, we've got a complete end-to-end chat system. So text, audio, and video chat between team members or team members and your clients. And then also we've got a very comprehensive notes tool similar to Evernote.
Right.
Where you can jot down ideas, capture meeting minutes, and write content within your business.
Right. So we're going to drill down into the actual product, the details of it in a little while. I just want to start off because this isn't your first startup journey that you yourself have done. What would you say? I think you've done startups from the kind of pre-cloud era, or the time when cloud wasn't so prevalent as it is now, to now where we're heavily involved in the cloud. What would you say the difference is for a startup who's trying to take a business to market now while cloud is available?
Well, it's definitely allowed us to scale a lot quicker at a much smaller price,
right,
if I can call it that. In the past, we were very limited to what we could do in terms of server capacity and using external service providers for your servers. I mean, hosting and owning your own server equipment was never really a good option for a young startup. But now moving into cloud, it allows you to scale from 1 to a million elastically, without having to have the infrastructure for 1 million ready from day one. And that's the real power of cloud for me.
And if you take a local cloud provider, for example, and compare those to the hyperscale clouds like the AWSs, the Microsoft Azure, GCP, etc., do you see a benefit in using the hyperscale clouds?
In my experience, the biggest benefit by far would be the ability to scale immediately without the need of support. If you go with a local provider, you've got to wait an hour or two, or maybe even a day or two, for them to put down bigger infrastructure or to increase your capacity and that. With the hyperscale, international platforms, there's none of that. You press the play button and tomorrow you can have 1 million users and your system won't fall over.
Right.
I mean, you can't really even put a price on that, So I mean, it's something not even worth thinking about. I mean, it's a definite thing to do.
So your agility rapidly has been increased.
Yes, and also if you look at the reliability of the services, we've increased our performance by about 300% by just moving into the hyperscale environment. And also the stability as well. Performance, stability, reliability, you can't compare the two.
Right. Now, many companies are waiting for the hyperscalers to land their clouds in country. There's been a lot of talk about the Microsoft data center, which was due to land in December.
Yeah. Still not there.
Still not there. There's AWS has announced that in 2020 they will have data centers in country. Okay. What is your advice to companies who are saying, well, we're waiting for cloud, we're waiting for it to arrive in country before we start using these hyperscale clouds?
I think a lot of IT teams and team leaders are scared because it's outside of their comfort zone. It's new to them. It brings a whole new environment to them. So their reputation and their careers could be on the line. Making a big move like that in a big company is risky. So that plays a big role. And also the misperception of the POPI Act. People think that you're not allowed to take information out of the country when actually you can. I mean, when you and I started talking about moving our tech, outside of the country, POPI was my biggest concern. And during my research, I found that you can actually store information outside of the country. So that really is not a problem. But it's one of the biggest excuses people use for not moving. I think if people can embrace cloud and see it for what it is, it'll change their lives.
Yeah, I've seen the POPI Act be used as a excuse of why not to do it, and also people have concerns over latency and worried about that. But in your experience, and certainly in my experience, latency is not an issue.
Well, I think we've had worse latency with the local providers, so that's definitely not an excuse.
Yeah. I think the only time one needs to be concerned about latency is if you're using a voice app in that kind of environment, then maybe if you need a voice response. Yeah,
exactly. Well, we've got voice calling and video calling in our platform. So, but the great thing about that is it happens in the same server environment. So your latency is really not a problem. It's instant.
Okay. Let's chat briefly about the startup community in South Africa. There's certainly a lot of buzz in South Africa about startups. There's some good startups that have come out of South Africa. And there seems to be quite a buzz about Cape Town specifically. Do you see Cape Town as the startup hub of South Africa?
I do actually, yes. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in the startup industry in Cape Town as well as Joburg. Joburg has definitely grown a lot, but I think if you have to label one as, the main hub in South Africa, I'd definitely say Cape Town. I mean, the startup community is strong. There's lots of incubators coming up. There's lots of support structures. There's lots of mentorship programs. I think we've still got a way to go. I think there's a lot of mental training that entrepreneurs still need to go through in order to become really successful, because there's a difference between having huge amounts of startups and having a bunch of successful startups.
Yes.
And to me, in my dead honest opinion, there's not enough successful startups coming through.
Right. And about 70% of VC funding apparently is filtered into the Cape Town startup community.
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, and I believe you've got quite a different view on how a startup should actually gather its momentum and whether it should go for VC funding. Perhaps you can tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've raised funds a couple of times within our group and within some of our subsidiaries. And the problem is when you raise funds for the very first time, or at the first round, you tend to give away quite a large bit of your equity. And there's a lot of risk. Early stage entrepreneurs really don't have respect for VC money. They've got this big sort of blue sky idea and this rock star lifestyle in their minds. They really don't understand how difficult it actually is to get a startup off the ground. So we've changed our model when it comes to funding. We've decided to build service companies within our group that builds the revenue and make them as profitable as possible, and then use those profits to invest into our own tech startups. And that model is working well, because that's exactly what we've done with Ydox. We've funded the whole thing ourselves, and now that we're ready for growth funding, to take the product globally, it's a whole different conversation. We're raising funds on a different scale than what we would have if we did it the first round.
Right.
And we still own 100% of the company.
And that's really something to be proud of. It's not something that a lot of people can actually say that they still do at that stage when a product becomes successful.
Exactly.
Carl, Ydox, you said, has got global aspirations, and I hear a lot of startups wanting to make an impact into the market and first saying, well, we're going after this global domination. We see our product as having worldwide appeal. What do you think about having that attitude of trying to go after the global markets first?
Sure, I think if you can't make it locally, then you're definitely not going to make it globally. The local market is a fantastic way to test your product and to test whether you've got the right team, to test whether your processes are working. Going global is a whole different ballgame. You've got to get a whole different set of legal paperwork and administrative paperwork in place. It costs a lot of money. You need Reserve Bank clearance to be able to trade globally. So I think as an early stage entrepreneur, most of them really don't understand what you need to do in order to be able to trade globally. It is a different ballgame.
So what advice would you give startups if they wanted to get to a global market eventually? What route should they take? I
would say focus on reaching success at home first.
Right.
And then work with someone that's got experience in a global environment, and get, whether it's on a mentorship level or an investor level, but get someone that's done it before to help you make that move.
Is there a perception globally around South African startups at all?
Sure, that's quite a sensitive topic. I've read up a bit about it. I think when it comes to your first world markets, there is a bit of hesitation of, when it comes to onboarding a new tech product, if they find out that it comes from Africa or, some third world country. I mean, that's a fact we can't ignore. But I think having a successful tech product coming out of Africa is one of the most beautiful stories in the world. It shows that Africa is right there. We are competing at the same levels as the guys in the States and in Europe. I mean, from what I've seen, the tech products that is coming out of Africa, it's unbelievable.
Yes.
So we definitely are competing, but there is that barrier, that trust issue, and when we as Ydox get to that point where we want to roll out in the American market, we are going to have to prove that we are worth it, because we are an African company and they are going to hold it against us at first.
I've used many SaaS products myself where one doesn't even look where the product was developed, where it's hosted or anything like that. You're just after the actual experience. And I wonder at what stage we'll actually get to that with South African SaaS products, that somebody will look at Ydox and they'll just say, wow, what a great product, and it just works. So I don't care where it comes from, where it started, etc.
Correct. I think it's just a matter of a certain level of traction. So when you're in your sort of first quarter of traction, you might have the issue of where's this product coming from. But when Ydox becomes a household name in the business world, you definitely won't have that problem.
Right.
I mean, if it's a word of mouth thing as well, and if you use a product that you really like and you can vouch for it, and you tell me about it, there's already a trust
that goes along. And I think user reference is the best selling the best selling point that there is. I
mean, our marketing strategy is the collaborators of our clients. So we are actually targeting the users of our clients. Okay. So in that way, we sort of bridge that trust gap from the beginning. Yeah,
and that's the ultimate compliment, I guess. If your customers' clients like the product, then you're creating a satisfied customer through the entire value stream.
The great thing is Ydox is branded with your own brand. It's a white labeled product.
Okay.
You know, so if your clients are using Ydox under your brand, there's already a brand trust between you and the client.
Right.
So that automatically creates trust between Ydox and the client.
Let's speak a bit about the cloud technology that you're using. So cloud has been on a, let's say, an advancement of the continuum of cloud, and it's gone from typical virtualization and using virtual servers to containerization and now serverless. Whereabout are you guys on that stream of the technology that you're using?
So we've gone the containerization route. So every client uses multiple containers in their environment. So you know, you'll know better than me, but that allows us to scale to the moon and back.
Yes.
Without having something that could become, you know, top heavy.
And also allows your costs to be
scale
contained.
with you. Yeah, it contains your costs exactly. Yeah. So your cost scales as you scale.
Right.
And
okay.
and the resources. You know, your cloud environment, the resources are all containerized.
And your product, I take it, can scale very easily for up to millions of users. You wouldn't have to then go and get this huge team to really support it.
There's no real difference between us having 100 customers and 1 million customers. You know, the cloud environment that we've set up in AWS has really allowed us to build a 100% scalable model.
Right. Called Digital HQ, described as a profitable incubator. And that certainly suggests that you've got good insights as to what a startup needs to get them going, and that without giving your secret formula away. Can you give some advice as to somebody who wants to start a new business? What do they need? There's the critical factors.
Well, first of all, we've got a couple of success stories, but we definitely have a couple of failures as well.
Yeah.
So I'd really want to say that our failures is the reason why we've been able to succeed. We're a profitable incubator because we don't just go and raise funds blindly and try a new project or try a new idea, and if it fails, we go and raise more funds to try and fix the problem. You know, so that's why we've changed our model to build our companies with our group profits, and then raise from there. You know.
Right. Okay, so that's what they should be going for, is to try and get themselves as sustainable as possible and really test out their models.
Yeah, I mean, what we've done with Ydox is we've implemented user testing from the beginning. So even when the product was still in its early stages, we onboarded a couple of beta clients, and we've spent a lot of time with clients getting feedback, making product changes. So it's very much been a working progress between us and our clients. But because we didn't raise funds for Ydox, we've been able to build and develop it in our own time. There's no pressure. There's no pressure from the public. The clients that we've used during the testing phase knew and was aware that they are testing clients. You know, so there's no disappointment that can happen if something falls over. They are aware that we're building a new product. So there's really no pressure. You know, there's no timelines. I mean, if I launch the next version of Ydox in 2 years' time, then that doesn't impact my business, you know, because I've got the revenue streams in our group that keeps everything afloat.
Yeah. But do you think that to operate in that kind of manner of not having those timelines is a realistic environment to be in? Because at some stage you're going to have that pressure from the customers saying, we want new features, we want them now, etc.
I think while the product is still in the development phase, yes, it's certainly helps because investors can put a lot of pressure on you.
Yes.
Investors don't understand your space as a technology entrepreneur. You know, so if they don't understand or support your vision or decision that you make, you know, you've got to answer for that. And then on the other side, then you've got the customers that want something different. So you're always, as an entrepreneur, you're torn between your investors, the board, and the clients. You know, so by doing it the way we've done, you know, we only answer to ourselves at the moment. And yes, when the time comes where we have a whole bunch of customers expecting certain new features, we'll have the revenue streams and the size of engineering team to be able to push out those features. But I mean, I'm pretty happy with the speed at which we're developing new features anyway. I mean, we're doing pretty well.
And you've got some exciting releases coming up, I believe.
Yes, well, we've recently launched our integration with Microsoft's Office 365, so that allows users to fully edit and co-author on Office files inside of Ydox. We've just started communication with Adobe to integrate with all their technologies, so there's some very, very exciting stuff coming in the future there, especially for the creative community. So yeah, there's some really cool stuff coming on.
Excellent. And lastly, Carl, just maybe just some final thoughts on the startup environment in Africa as a whole, and if you had, say, a magic wand that you could create one thing that you think would spark this continent for success, what would that be?
Sure, there's definitely some really amazing stuff coming out of Africa. For the first time, I think about, when was it? A few months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, one of our startups won an African award for top 5 enterprise app in the Apps Africa Awards.
Right.
And that gave me the opportunity to see what's going on in the tech world in Africa, because at the award ceremony we were only a handful of South African companies that actually reached the finals. The rest were all scattered all over Africa. And I couldn't believe the content that was coming from there. So I don't really know, I can't put my finger on what would make the real difference, but I think exposure. You know, if African tech companies could get more exposure on the same level as your Silicon Valley kind of, you know, we need to get into the tech crunches a bit more. You know, all those platforms that shine light on Silicon Valley companies. We need that in Africa.
Maybe a potential opportunity there is these hyperscale clouds have all got marketplaces, and to get a product like yours into those marketplaces and leverage that, because once you're in that, you've got this global platform that you can scale with.
Look, I think marketplace is really a good idea. I believe AWS and Azure both have very strong marketplaces, but you're still going to need a reputation and a brand that goes with that. And I think if you can manage to get both, I think you're in a good place.
Excellent. Well, Carl, good luck, and we look forward to seeing the success of Ydox. And thanks for joining us on the Cloud of Africa.
Thanks, Kevin. Cheers.